We talking rom-com, we talking action, we talking drama and movie classics. Whatever you want, yo, we have it. Cause we talking movies on the podcast. So I married a film critic. So I married a film critic. So I married a film critic. Hey honey, I just want to talk about the movie like casually. You don't have to bring up the cinematography. Honestly, let's just talk about like how the characters were fun. Married a film critic. So I married a film critic.
Welcome to So I Married a Film Critic. I'm your co-host Julia.
And I'm Barry. Hello, everyone.
He's the film critic.
Allegedly. How's everybody doing?
So last night you asked me if I wanted to watch a movie, and I said, which one? And you told me it was called Mass. And I'm like, is this some horror movie trick that you're trying to play on me?
It's short for Massive Attack.
Yeah. No, just the title of the film is Mass. And I said, okay, well, tell me something about it. And you said, well, it's best if you just go in blind, which you always say. But it's true in this case. And you just said it's 4 people in a room and they're having a meeting. And I'm like, in the basement of a church. And I thought, I have no idea where this could possibly be going.
Well, you asked me some specifics. You asked, is this like some weird, like, sexual thing? Like, no.
Or I said, is it going to be horror, psychological, like weird? And you're like, no, drama.
Yeah,
like,
I said it's just a drama. And I think that's all you need to know.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I think the company, Bleecker Street, this movie is, I mean, we're recording this in the fall of 2021. This movie is slowly making its way around theaters. It's critically acclaimed, and there's a lot of Oscar buzz for it for reasons we'll get into. They're doing a good job promoting it. I will say, unfortunately, that the trailer spells it all out. There's a key line of dialogue that's in...
Like, don't watch the trailer if you haven't seen this movie, and we will have spoilers. So, again, turn it off and go see it before you listen. But don't watch any trailers.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because, to be clear, yeah, it's this Episcopal church. We know that there are 2 couples who are husband and wife. They're going to be meeting each other in the basement of this church. There's a table that's been set up.
There's a lawyer there. We just don't know.
We don't know
anything.
why they're there. We don't know what the meeting is about. We could sense from the church, the few church members that are there who are setting things up, that this is tense.
It's a big deal.
It's a very big deal.
Like people
it's
know
secretive.
about it. No,
Yeah.
but they know what it is. You know what I mean?
But we also understand that they shouldn't be talking about it. There's something kind of taboo about it. Yeah. The setup of the film, which is just them getting there and arriving, I found unbearably intense, honestly.
Unbearable. I was laying on the couch going, okay, what is it? Why are they meeting? Who are these people?
We meet the couple. It's interesting. One couple we meet before they get to the church for the meeting, and it's played by Jason Isaacs and Martha Plimpton. I grew up with Martha Plimpton. She's, of course, in Parenthood. She was with River Phoenix for a while, and she did a few films with him.
She was in one of my favorite movies, Beautiful Girls.
Yeah, she's an amazing character actress, and I hate that phrase. It always sounds like such a backhanded compliment. But whatever, she doesn't need to be the star. She's always been just
solid.
She's so versatile, so good. She's done a great theater too. I've always been a fan of hers. And then playing her husband is Jason Isaacs, who I think has made a pretty steady career playing bad guys. He's probably best known for Harry Potter. I certainly think of him as the bad guy in The Patriot. He's also Captain Hook in the version of Peter Pan I really like, the P.J. Hogan one. So they're both playing an American couple, and I don't think I've ever seen Jason Isaacs play an American before, and I got to say, seamless, perfect.
I mean,
you would never guess this dude ain't from around here.
Like, where is he from?
He's Jason Isaacs.
Yeah,
I believe he's British.
Oh yeah, I had no idea. I didn't even think about it. Yeah, they were great.
Yeah, rock solid. So we meet them outside of the church. They're in the car. They're having second thoughts about even going to this thing. And it's interesting, too, because, again, we don't know the nature of it. We don't know if we're looking at protagonists or antagonists.
Yeah, it's
we're really
are they
the
good guys or the bad guys?
Like, why? Yeah. So it puts you in a really uncomfortable place.
It really does.
And I got to say, like, it's a very smartly made film, and we'll get into more of that specifically. But the writer-director, Fran Kranz, he basically, it feels so real. It feels very authentic. It doesn't feel like a particularly contrived film. Even the business of the workers at church, the lady and the young man.
She was funny.
And this movie needs any bit of levity it has. I mean, any bit of comedy whatsoever. And it's not really comic relief, but they feel like real people. They don't even seem like actors.
Like the gal, she's this really pretty redhead, and she comes downstairs, and there's a guy doing dishes, and she's like, will you help me set up this room? And she's like, why are you doing dishes? And he's like, well, somebody left a mess. And she's like, did the AA meeting not clean up? He's like, no, they always clean up. It's the Al-Anon meeting. It's just funny.
It's good stuff, and it's a good setup. And I'll say quickly that the thing that I was a little hard on, not even hard on this film, but the thing that jumped out at me initially was that I thought this is a play. This is probably, maybe he wrote it as a play first, or maybe he envisioned it as a theater piece. But I think it's, without getting too deep into hyperbole, I think it's brilliantly edited and shot in a way that I never felt like it was claustrophobic. It never felt like it was so forced. To use the term, not only is it opened up enough that it escapes any kind of theatrical staging in its origin, I felt like I was a fly in the wall.
I never would have thought it was a play, but
Really?
it would make a really good play.
And I'm glad that it isn't. And the writer-director, Fran Kranz, this guy, I mean, I remember him 10 years ago. He was in The Cabin in the Woods, which, of course, is the Joss Whedon horror film. And he plays a character who looks and sounds uncannily like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. It's a goofy and fun performance. Who would have thought?
Yeah, this guy's got some deep thoughts.
This is a directorial debut, and he wrote it too, which is astonishing. He's a young dude, and this is it's easy to do something like this and make it look like an actor's showcase. And forgive me, I know we got to talk more about the plot, but I got to say, like, one of the things that made me hesitant about even wanting to see a film like this, because I just think this is just an actor's exercise. This is going to be a movie where four good actors just have the access to scream at each other for 2 hours in the name of great acting, and
and it's not going to feel real.
Yeah, and neither of those things are true about this, but we can continue.
No,
with the
I
plot.
mean, okay. Oh, it's just, at the end of this movie, I was literally like speechless.
Yeah, it leaves you speechless.
Yeah. But
yeah.
Okay, so they come downstairs and they're waiting, and it's just like agonizing. And so then
because you don't know.
Yeah,
because you don't know, and you're every crumb of dialogue, every exchange, you're trying to extract something. We get that there is tension. We get that the people at the church know what's going on, and they're trying to be hush hush about it. But we just don't know, and it's extremely discomforting.
So the second couple that comes in is played by
the wonderful Reed Birney, who is a acclaimed Broadway actor, multiple Tony Award winner, and of course Ann Dowd, arguably best known as Aunt Lydia from The Handmaid's Tale, but another brilliant actress who's been around a long time.
Yeah. So when I saw them, I was like, oh, okay, another just like normal, regular couple, And they're just like, oh, hi, good to see you, thank you for your letters. So you're like, okay, there's been some letter writing here. Ann Dowd brings her flowers. She made like a little bouquet. And it's like, okay, these people know each other, but how do they know each other?
And by the way, we should probably just say, like they have character names. Well, let's just refer to them by the actor name.
Yeah, it's too confusing.
Yeah, because the couple, Martha Plimpton and Jason Isaacs, they're playing Gail and Jay. And then, of course...
too confusing.
Yeah, Richard and Linda, or Reed Birney and Ann Dowd. But yeah, we're just going to refer to them by the actors' names. And no disrespect, because these are four, as far as I'm concerned, perfect performances.
Yeah, so they sit down at the table and they start, I don't know, just like...
Initially, they don't say anything.
Yeah.
Initially, there is an uncomfortable one of many uncomfortable
Well, it was
silences.
like, how was your drive?
Right.
How was your travels? And then Ann Dowd says, how's your daughter? So you're like, okay, there's kids. So Martha Plimpton, that couple has a daughter. The Ann Dowd couple has a son. And so initially you're like, okay, I was thinking, does it have to do with those kids? I didn't know. And then Martha Plimpton shows some photographs of
It's been established,
a different son. Well, of her family.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been established that they had talks through the lawyer beforehand that there would be an exchange of pictures.
Yeah, an exchange of pictures. And we never get to see the pictures. So we don't ever get to see anything like that. Yeah. And so that was interesting. And so you're like, okay, you find out there's another son. And then Ann Dowd, instead of pulling out photographs, she pulls out what looks like a mason jar that was decorated by a child. And it's like she's telling this story about snails, how her son liked to catch snails, but then they would die. And so he made like a fake snail garden. And so I'm like, where's this going? Like, that's like, are they little kids? It's very confusing. I don't even know how to transition into what the surprise is, because it's just, the conversation feels so real. Like it actually could have happened. Something could have happened this way. I
don't know if there was ever a moment these actors improvised, because it seems like the script, I'm assuming, I don't know. I have no inside info on the making of this film, but it just seems like they stuck to the script, because there's no...
They had to have stuck to a script.
It had to be word for word.
Yeah.
Because it's tight. It doesn't, it's intense, but it's also brisk, I found.
Yeah, and like Ann Dowd asks Martha, like, so you said you were seeing a therapist and that's going well. And it's interesting. They're asking each other questions and then people are responding. And it's like, it's funny. One of a couple will respond and the other partner, they show the reactions and it's almost like
they're talking,
biting sometimes.
Yeah, it's biting. And something I noticed, because watching it with you last night was the second time I've seen it. There are times where the actors don't have any dialogue, but they facially react they do. And Martha Plimpton, at times, I'm like, this is a masterclass on how to do this. Yeah. There's a scene where she and her husband are recalling what they learned from therapy. And the husband says the wrong term, and he's like, "Yeah, it doesn't matter." And you watch Plimpton, and she's making a face saying, "Yeah, it matters. Yeah, you should know."
Yeah, it's kind of like you and me when I'm like, "No, that's not the right word."
Oh yeah, no, I couldn't relate to that at all. No, absolutely. There's everything about this film feels uncomfortably lived in.
Yeah, because they say, our therapist said, we're not going to interrogate you. We're not going to attack you. We want to just have a conversation. And it's just, the whole time how long till the reveal?
It's a very long,
30 minutes?
Maybe 30 minutes. We should just get to it, I guess. The line, unfortunately, that's in the trailer, which I wish it wasn't. But again, like, that's neither here nor there. But it basically tells you what the film is about, which is, at one point, Martha Plimpton's character says to Ann Dowd, "I want to know about your son." And you want to know about my son? I want to know everything about your son. Well, he killed mine, so I want to know about him. And that's where. And then there's a bit of a pause.
So you blame yourself? I'm asking, do you blame yourself? What? No, I want to know. I didn't come here to talk politics. I want to know.
We don't want to interrogate.
I can imagine how hard it is to live with his actions.
It is.
But our loss... Please just tell me, what do you mean by that? When you talk about blame on your part, I want to know what you're referring to.
There is nothing that wasn't covered in the depositions.
But I want to hear it now. We never filed against you. We never took part in any of that.
Maybe a better way than interrogating is to learn what we remember.
Fine. So, tell me what you remember. Tell me about your son.
What would you like to know?
Everything. I want to know everything.
Why?
Why do I want to know about your son? Because he killed mine.
And it's great because it doesn't feel like the actors are pausing. It's what happens when you're talking with a group of people and somebody says something that just physically shocks you.
Somebody says the honest thing that everyone's thinking. Like they finally say
They
it.
finally say it, and the audience finally goes, "Oh, we understand what this is."
Yeah. So basically, there was a school shooting, and Jason Isaacs and Martha Plimpton's son Evan is one of the victims.
Yeah.
So Evan is the victim, and Hayden was the shooter.
And again, to stress, there's no flashbacks.
No.
At one point, there is a vivid and really horrifying verbal recounting of exactly what happens at the school shooting. It's an agonizing moment. It's also necessary.
It's just all talking, though. It's not.
It's all talking. There's no sound effects. There's nothing. But it's telling it like a story, moment by moment, to understand exactly the nature of the shooting. And as I told you, even watching it last night, it was hard because, I mean, I remember where I was when Columbine happened. I think a lot of people do. And certainly, you and I were both I was in Colorado. Were you?
I was in California.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The details of it are very similar to Columbine, although in this case it's one boy, not two.
Yeah.
But the specifics of the tragedy are similar to Columbine. And
well, I think because they mentioned like a library. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
And also how it ends, and also, and I wouldn't be surprised if the director thought about the parents of Columbine or school shootings in general when he decided to write this. Yeah, it's definitely an angle I've never seen portrayed, and I got to say too, to get back to the film, but this reeks of. It was called God of Carnage on Broadway. The movie was called Carnage, the Polanski film where it's 4 people in a room, which, by the way, is exactly what I was afraid this was going to be. And I like that movie, but it's 4 people screaming at each other for 2 hours for laughs, but that's what it is. And the Mike Nichols film, which you haven't seen, I don't think, called Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, which is also, that's 4 people drunk yelling at each other for 2 hours, Edward Albee. And I gotta say, like, those are good movies, but I don't like those kinds of films. And I've only seen those once, and I'm never going to watch them again. I don't care about films that show actors being histrionic and screaming at each other. There's too many examples of that sort of nonsense.
Well, because...
And my point is just that this movie avoids that completely.
Well, because none of us can relate to that at all. Most of the time... we have like imaginary conversations in our head and we think that's what we would do, and it never happens. The conversation, the confrontation, it's always, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. Everything about this, the pauses. Yeah. Sometimes the characters are struggling they're putting their sentences together as they speak, as most people do. But you really hear it. There's language in this dialogue. It doesn't feel like exposition. It really feels thoughtful. It's storytelling. It's character building. And it gives the actors the opportunity to fill in the blanks with the nuance that they bring to their performances. Yeah. And these are not hammy performances at all. And something I wrote about in my review, I kind of regret it now, having seen the film a second time. But the first time I saw it, I thought Ann Dowd was giving kind of a mannered performance. You know what? I think, and I mentioned this in my review too, I think my problem might have been just that initially her character irritated me so much that I was resistant to it. And looking at the film again, I think... her character is definitely the most demonstrative with her emotions. There's something kind of earthy and flighty about her, respectfully. But yeah, I think I was so resistant to her initially, and that's of course the character and the performance that, as I've told you, like really moved me the most when the film is over. Yeah,
I think what struck me the most about their conversation was when Ann Dowd says, like, tell me a story about Evan. And I think, they get a chance to tell a couple stories about the kids. And it just is so moving. And, when the dads kind of go at it and they kind of talk about their, I don't know, the science behind, why people do what they do and mental illness, and well, maybe he had a problem with his frontal cortex, like they spend a few minutes kind of just going on these rabbit trails, and you can see the wives just like in pain physically.
Bipolar disorder, depression, mania, ADHD, possible schizoaffective disorder.
None of that is psychopathy. You don't know what you're talking about.
If you take the medical records with the criminal report, which we have the full report, don't you have to weigh the evidence, the facts of what he did against your personal relationship,
He
your
became
history
those
with him?
things. He wasn't always those things.
We can trace how far back to when he started planning it. We can trace his footsteps, for Christ's sake.
I don't think the timeline definitively proves anything about his mental state.
How can you say
We're
that?
not denying what he did or who he became.
Well, I can't help but hear you blame a not abnormal childhood.
He was my son. I can't remove my feelings from our history or his records.
I'm not asking you to. I'm saying that what he did, his capacity for murder was probably potentially there a long time before anyone could have known.
You think you can attach one word to something in order to understand it? To make you feel safe? Well, I won't say it. I don't believe it. It's not simple. It's everything you cannot see.
These are not stupid conversations. These are These are, I mean, well, just to say, like, these are the exchanges are very intelligent.
Yeah.
And there's not a game of one-upmanship. It's just that Martha Plimpton and Jason Isaacs' characters, they're there for a reason. They need
Closure.
They need closure, and they openly admit it's a part of them wanting to know how much the other parents have suffered, how much they actually knew, how much,
Yeah, like, didn't you know? Like, why didn't you do more? And it, it was a lot of those questions. And the other parents are like, well, we did. He saw a therapist. He was just quiet. We didn't think there was anything like really wrong with him. We didn't think he would do something like this. And it's so heartbreaking. And I think, the parts that as a mom, I think struck me the most was when Ann Dowd, she's like, sometimes I think, would this world be a better place if he had never been born? And then she's like, but, I have these memories of him as a child. I have these, I raised him, like I was his mom, and I have to come to terms with the fact that I raised a murderer. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just like bawling. And she's just very honest about but his life still had value, like even though it ended up this way. And it's a very interesting conversation just about the value of a human life, like even one that takes so many lives, like you think about people whose kids end up on like death row or something like that, who've done horrific things. And it's like, they have memories of that terrible person as a baby, as a toddler. And I can't imagine like how hard that would be to come to terms with something like that. And she really brings that forth. Like, she really brings that message forth of just like, I can't wish that he had never been born, but it's just so awful. Like, I don't even know how to live with it. Yeah. And then, the other mom, when she's like, I just want his life to matter, to like mean something. Like, I don't want his death to be in vain. And, then Ann Dowd says, tell us a story about Evan. And so she tells this story, it's a sweet story. And, they're smiling, and the parents are like kind of crying and laughing at the story that she's telling. And it was like, your son doesn't like have to change the world for his life to have mattered, because he changed your world, like he mattered to you. And so again, his life has inherent worth and value because he was a part of your family, and he always will be, kind of a thing.
Yeah, the film wants to engage both sides of the argument, which is impossible, and admirable the way this film approaches it. This is a film that really, it was written with an empathetic hand and performed by actors who are able to find that. It reminds me of a couple of things. For one thing, all the movies that were made about Columbine, post-Columbine, and I didn't really like them. There was one called 0 Days, I believe, which was the faux video diaries of the shooters. Well done. I'd never watch it again. There was one that was celebrated that Gus Van Sant did called Elephant, which I cannot stand. I've never understood the love for that film. And then Uma Thurman did one, which I'm not even going to say the name because it was so terrible. Most of them, they're well-intentioned, but, honestly, I say that about all the films I can't stand. Good intentions always lead to the worst things. It's like, well, we meant well. Well, making a movie about school shootings, especially so soon after Columbine happened, it just felt like a lot of these films didn't quite, they hadn't even processed it, let alone, come up with, any kind of emotional response to it that was appropriate. So on the one hand, I wanted to pay the film a compliment and say, this is the one film this isn't a Columbine film, but it is dealing with the topic of school shootings, and it deals with it in a way that I thought, especially, I don't want to use balance because that's not the word at all. It's thoughtful and it's complex in the way it deals with it. Nuanced. And something I also wanted to add too that I thought of as you were mentioning this conversation that you mentioned, this whole idea of finding the human in the monster, talking about somebody who is referred to as just a demon, but he was actually a person. It reminds me of, it doesn't remind me of the film, but it reminds me of the experience you and I had. When you and I were first married, I took you to see this film in Denver that was so controversial. It only played in Denver for a week. Do you remember Max?
Yeah. About
Hitler as a young man. It was with John Cusack, and it was Hitler as an artist, and the movie is pontificating of what if Hitler had decided to be a crappy artist instead of a crappy human being, and it was interesting because the film was such a controversial film, really heavily criticized, but it had these arresting moments like where John Cusack, again, because this is Hitler well before he was anything. So there's a moment where John Cusack, kind of famously, critics have picked on the movie for it, but there's a moment where he goes, Hitler, let me buy you some lemonade, like really kind of odd, these odd moments, but the film wants to go out of its way. And the thing that I like about it, the movie really wants to go out of its way to take away all the mystique. What, like it or not, there's a lot of mystique to the image of Hitler. We make him the boogeyman when really he was a little scumbag. He was a human being who did at times suffer, who did at times, act like human beings do. And it's even hard for me to talk about Hitler that way, but the film is making the point that if we make something to be a one-sided monster, we're not only stripping the humanity, but we're also lacking understanding.
Yeah. And it makes it seem like this, things like this can't happen again when they can.
And they do.
Yeah. And it was just, I don't even know how to talk about it really because.
Well, you're doing fine so far.
Well, but it just, I think your empathy just really switches back and forth between the two couples,
and it doesn't feel contrived.
No.
It doesn't not in a contrived way. There's a lot of unspoken stuff that's interesting. The couple played by Ann Dowd and Reed Birney, it's never spoken about, but clearly they're not together anymore. Clearly, they've been apart.
I didn't think of that.
Yeah, they came together, but clearly they don't live together anymore. There are moments where she reaches out to touch him or to hold his hand, and he does not reciprocate. Not in a mean way, but clearly they're done. They've probably been done for a while.
Yeah.
And that's something the film does not speak of. We get it from their body language. We get it from their performance. And again, I think that's a wonderful touch as opposed to over-explaining everything. Yeah. If anything, this movie, it's not vague, but it does make you do a little bit of heavy lifting just in terms of understanding everything. I mean, you have to listen to really get this film. Yeah, if you have a short attention span, it's not going to work.
I mean, I wish we had the subtitles, honestly. But it was good because I really had to pay attention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I loved that couple because, she is so Andowed. She is so sweet and just like touchy-feely. And her, I guess ex-husband, he's
he's a businessman. He's
aloof.
steely. He's cold.
Yeah.
He's to the point. He chooses his words incredibly well. And, you get a sense this is a guy just absolutely rocks the boardroom.
But that's my least favorite, out of the four, because you think, okay, well.
But he allows us to see that he suffered too.
He totally has.
He in his way, he becomes as transparent as they all do over the course of the conversation.
They all do become transparent. But, there's an interesting, they're talking and she talks about how Hayden loved to be outside and then they had to move to a different neighborhood and the backyard wasn't as big. And, the husband's like, yeah, but it was a really nice house and a nice neighborhood. And she's like, yeah, it was nice. You're right. But he loved to be outside and he didn't get to be outside, kind of a thing, you know? And just like those things that parents kind of discuss of like, yeah, you know, yeah, you did try to make the best choice at the time. And now we're having to look back with 2020 vision and dissect everything. And now we're having to dissect every little decision that we made and wonder if that was the thing that tipped it, you know, for our kid to make him just, I don't know, go nuts.
Yeah, it's not just about understanding how someone becomes a killer. It's also understanding parental failure and the guilt of that.
Yeah.
You know,
the guilt. Because I didn't really feel like it was about so much about how he became this way as it was them dealing with suffering after this. You know, when they talked about not being able to go to the funeral, I mean, that was heartbreaking.
It's powerful, yeah.
It was powerful because you're thinking, you know, there were 10 victims plus the killer who killed himself. And so they're like, yeah, there were 11 kids that died, but only 10 were able to go to the funeral, and we didn't get to go.
And they speak about how they also went to the school, and that was a secretive thing. It's good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether this has any bearing on as to what really happened post Columbine or post any of these awful occurrences, I found it valuable to even consider these things.
Exactly.
Because I'm guilty too. You know, when I'm not going to say their names, but when the boys who committed Columbine, I certainly thought about the parents, and I certainly had angry, judgmental feelings towards them.
You didn't go into your kid's room. You didn't see that they had plans. You didn't see they had a stockpile. You know. And
it's something the film plays with too, which I thought this is smart because they name names. And what I mean by that is, you know, post Columbine, you know, everybody went after Marilyn Manson. People went after The Matrix. People went after violent video games. This movie doesn't go after art necessarily.
It goes after video games.
It goes after Call of Duty.
Yeah.
It goes after first-person shooter games. It goes after, you know, internet culture and you know,
bullying, school bullying.
Yeah. So it does come up with some talking points we've heard before, but not in a way that feels preachy. It's strange because it's a powerful film. I feel it'd be incorrect to say it's heavy-handed. I don't think so.
No.
It's the subject matter is heavy, but because these characters are talking and not screaming and not yelling, it's not wall-to-wall profanity.
Well, they're crying at times.
Yeah, it's
really emotional.
It's a conversation, and it's not a movie that has a specific political point or any political point.
No.
It's really just about the human experience.
Yeah.
The two examples when I was in college, you know, My Dinner with Andre was a big one, you know, a movie about two men having a conversation in a diner, which is a lovely film. And it really lives up to its classic status. But there's another film I loved even more, and it was from the same filmmakers, and it's out of print. It's called Mind Walk. It was with Sam Waterston, John Hurd, and Lee Volman. And it's three people in a castle having this conversation about the world and art. And I love that film. But the thing is, inevitably, you're going, I'm watching a movie about three people talking, and I just never had that with this. With Mass, it always felt strangely suspenseful. It always felt cinematic, and the camera doesn't move a whole lot. It's just a bunch of shifting perspectives with the camera is.
Well, because I was wondering how is this? Is there a resolution?
Yeah.
Can there be a resolution?
Right.
I mean, there's, you know, how does this end?
Yeah,
because there's all you know is that they signed legal documents basically that they wouldn't use any of this information against them.
Yeah.
You know, and that this was purely just to find closure.
Personal
closure, yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, when Martha Plimpton at near the end, she's like, I forgive you. I mean, I lost it. Like,
yeah, these are big moments.
Yeah,
like, you know, this
big moment.
Very big moments. She says she's able to.
Like, I can't live like this. We don't eat, we don't sleep, we don't do anything. This completely controls our entire life. You know, they have a daughter who's I don't know, dating now, probably like 16-ish, who's been just traumatized. And it's like, yeah, after going through something so traumatic, I think there's, you go, then there were like the settlements, there were court cases, there's been letters, there's been therapists. I mean, this woman, she's just like, I can't keep hating you guys. And she even said, I forgive Hayden, which I thought was, I mean, part of me was like, seriously? Like, what? It just kind of shows all the pre-work that had gone into her life before this conversation, I think. Because it wasn't like, oh, this shooting happened like a year ago. I'm thinking it had been years,
Yeah, and in the sequence that you're referring to, it doesn't feel contrived. The actors are clearly in control here. They're controlling the pacing. They're controlling their choices. And clearly the director is doing a wonderful job of getting that work from them, or not even getting from them, just encouraging them. But the obvious example was, it's not like the you can't handle the truth moment at the end of A Few Good Men.
No, this was...
And I love A Few Good Men,
yeah.
but it's always been noted, like Colonel Jessup really cracks easy. Like, he really buckles under Tom Cruise's weight, You're right, I did. You're right, I ordered the code red, And you go, okay, like, wow, for a guy who's, a highly decorated veteran military guy, he really cracks when Tom Cruise yells at him. And
Tom Cruise is intimidating.
Well, Tom Cruise is the man. But no, I mean, not to be so jokey about it, but when we get to the moment that you're referring to at the end of the film, where Plimpton's character has this amazing catharsis, where it's not just that she's tired.
I mean, you can feel like the weight lift off of her.
Yeah, this is an actress who takes a potentially maudlin and potentially disastrous bit of dialogue. Yeah, I mean, this could have really bombed. But every word sounds authentic and lived in. Yeah. And I believe it, and I like the pacing of it. I like the way the camera shows the reaction shots, but nothing is overstated for a movie that could have been so bombastic, and it just avoids that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, after all of that, they just kind of go, well, I think this is a good place to end. They kind of have like a moment of silence, which I thought was appropriate. And then everybody kind of says their awkward goodbyes. And, yeah. But then the story, the scene with Ann Dowd coming back into the church after the ex-husband, he's already left. And she says, I want to tell you a story about Hayden. And it's heartbreaking because it's not, Martha Plimpton's story is very sweet and fun and uplifting. And you think, yeah, that's like how you would describe a teenage boy, and then Ann Dowd just tells you just this horrific story about her son. And it's like, that's what she has to live with, is that knowledge. I don't know how anybody can move past something like that,
Well, the scene you're referring to is what made me love the film. I remember even watching it thinking, this is big. This film is full of so many moments that, when you think of what a climax in a film is, when you think of what a finale in a film is, what the third act moment is, a car crash, an explosion. And in this movie, it's these conversations where these revelations come out. Yeah, but the final moment where Ann Dowd's character returns, it's so surprising because, to say the least, the movie is starting to overstay its welcome. The conversation is over.
You're like, oh, well,
they finished the
done.
conversation. Yeah, so there's a bit of business of just the flowers that was given to Martha Plimpton.
How are we going to get these flowers back to our?
And it seems kind of banal, and you're like, okay, just like the end credits can start rolling anytime now. And no, yeah, the Ann Dowd character reappears, and it's interesting the way they shoot it too. I really watched it this second time really closely because I remember the first time I saw it, I had the most awful thought. I thought, oh no, did Ann Dowd return with a gun, or like what are they?
Oh, I actually had that thought.
What
too.
are they reacting to? Yeah, because the way it's filmed is the first couple, if you will, played by Jason Isaacs and Martha Plimpton. They're speaking to the church folk about the flowers, and then suddenly they realize that there's someone else in the room. They both turn towards the camera, and there's this moment of like, oh, you, and then we see Ann Dowd. So I wonder like, what in the world, what is happening here? And then Ann Dowd steps forward with this monologue, which is quite remarkable. And it ends with her and Martha Plimpton embracing. And yeah, that was the crusher moment for me.
Yeah.
It's I mean, for one thing, what that moment means to them emotionally is such a breakthrough, and it's such an amazing moment for them as characters. It's an amazing thing for us to witness, because it doesn't, again, like everything else in this movie, it doesn't feel contrived. It feels like it's happening.
Yeah.
I was so blown away by that decision.
Yeah.
Because that moment right there, you can't say this is an actor's exercise. You can't say that this is merely a stunt of 4 people in a room talking, because it has that scene, which is so incredible.
Yeah.
I
mean, basically, she's admitting that her son was violent and would have just beat the crap out of her. And he said he was going to, but he didn't. And she just is like, I would have taken all the hits that he would have given me if it had would have changed anything, basically. Isn't that what he said?
It is. And I got to say, it is surreal seeing Ann Dowd in this role.
Yeah.
It is surreal because for years I've been watching her on The Handmaid's Tale, where she is this oppressive,
the worst
religious fundamentalist.
really,
violent. One of the best villains on television right now. We're both fans of The Handmaid's Tale, and her work in particular continues to just be astonishing, and her character so horrifying.
Yeah.
But yeah, to see her in this light, and I've seen her in other things too, and I've seen her in things subsequently. She's kept busy in her breaks of doing The Handmaid's Tale. She's done some movies, but yeah, her work here is really incredible. And that again, the final scene is amazing. And then there's a moment after that, which is also very moving, I must say, where
the choir
arrives and they start singing, and the Jason Isaacs character,
he's just like, what?
He's just overcome by the beauty of it, the music, and he and his wife have this even to talk about it, it sounds like it's so forced. Okay, it ends with them embracing and they hear the music, but there's something so simple about it, because it is about these 2 characters that want to get catharsis, they want to heal, they want to move on, and in a sense, perhaps they have.
And even the gal who works at the church, who's a little annoying and a little earnest, but she's she has a line where she says, "It's really healing here," and you kind of get the sense of no, she really means that. She really believes that.
Yeah.
And there was something that happened in that room for these 4 people.
Yeah.
And it is they did go to church, mm-hmm. and they had the longest confession of their life. And that was what needed to happen.
Would you say it's a religious film? Even regarding the title?
I didn't feel not in a overly...
Yeah, not in a pronounced way.
No, not in a pronounced way. But I mean, it's called Mass for a reason, And so I think it's religious in the sense that they have an experience, and that there is something about confessing your feelings, your thoughts, telling the truth to people that releases it just releases something for you. It's all that pent up, all those pent up feelings, all that pent up stories and all those things. It's that's why Ann Dowd came back. She knew she wasn't done. She's I have another confession. There's still this piece of truth I haven't told you yet, that if I tell you, maybe I can be free of some of my torment, And if nothing else, I think that's what she needed to do. And so, yeah, I think religious in the sense of people finding catharsis and peace, and just being able to move on from really one of the most horrific tragedies that could happen to parents. Not just losing a child, but losing your child in such a violent way. Saying goodbye to your kid and they're going to school and then they don't come back. I mean, no, that's the worst. I mean, I'm doing a disservice, but it's unthinkable.
No. It's a hard one.
Yeah.
I told you, not long after Columbine, I met someone who managed to get out of the school. I got to meet a young Columbine survivor, and I had friends at the college I was going to. I was in Lakewood, which is not that close, but it was close enough to to where Columbine was, and I had a friend who lost some friends who went to Columbine.
Yeah.
It's just, it's the film alludes to it too, just how it's so horrible it doesn't seem humanly possible.
Right.
So to even, as they do in the film, even to go through the specifics, the step-by-step recollections of what actually happened moment to moment, it's, it doesn't seem humanly possible at all.
Yeah.
It's so horrifying.
It is. And I love that the movie doesn't try to give us any solutions or this is what you should have done or this is how we can prevent this in the future. It really isn't about that. It's about finding empathy, I think. For
common ground and understanding. Compassion.
Compassion. Yeah.
Which is, to say the least, I mean, it's a film that we really need right now.
And I think one of the things, maybe that this is a religious thing, I don't know, but that hating your enemies really doesn't get you anywhere. Even though they have every reason to hate the son who killed their son and the parents of who raised that killer, it was destroying them. And so, there is that verse like, love your enemies and pray for those that persecute you. And it's like, if there's any message, that's probably it, is don't keep that hate in your heart, because it's not going to do you any good. It's just going to eat away at you. And when Martha Plimpton is like, we don't eat, we don't sleep, we don't do any, this is all consuming. It's like, I think that's the message, is like, if there's any way that you can find peace after a tragedy, that you should attempt to do that. Just for your own sake, not even for any other reason, just so that you can, otherwise you're not going to be able to live your life, that's all you'll think about.
You were right to point out early on that it's an interesting touch that we never see the photographs. We never see the boys. We never see their faces. We never see what happened. We don't see any footage, no reenactments, nothing. And what it does is it puts you, the audience, completely in the place of these characters. What would you do? What would you say?
Yeah.
How would you react to this? It's really, if anything, this film, in its simple way, is having a conversation with the audience.
Yeah.
And that's what great drama does. It really does. I mean, it's not telling you exactly. Just like you said, it's not telling you how you should feel about this. Mm-mm. It's providing, like any smart film, it asks a lot of questions. It doesn't give you the answers.
Yeah, it gives you really no answers.
But if it gives anything, I mean, I don't think it gives phony uplifts, but I still found the ending incredibly moving.
Yeah.
Because again, this is a film that wants us to come to common ground. It wants us to have compassion and understanding for each other, even when we see one another as enemies or good and bad.
Yeah, because it doesn't take away the fact that there is still mass murder event that happened. It doesn't take that away, and you would never go, oh yeah, like it's fine now. Like, no, you would never say that.
Yeah, and the hard thing that this film approaches is that it's basically the question of accountability. What if you can ask someone who was the parent of a monster child, if you can ask them those hard questions?
Yeah, what would you ask?
And would you be able to hear? Would you be able to hear that? Would you be able to accept that children are children, babies are babies, and we're all born the same way, and we all end up the same way, and in between, we don't know who we're going to end up with. We don't know what the end result is. We know that we raise children. We try to
do our best.
Yeah, do our best, and it sometimes it doesn't turn out, to put it mildly. But and all that to say, like the film even avoids that kind of simple solution. It's very powerful. Very powerful.
So we highly recommend it. You said it was one of your favorites of this year.
It's one of the best films of 2021. I feel comfortable saying that. I'm nowhere near coming up with my so-called list.
It's not even the end of 2021, so this is high praise.
Well, I mean, what does it say? That this is a movie about 4 people in a room talking, and I saw it 2 weeks ago, and I couldn't wait to see it again. So when I got, when I received a screener for it for Academy consideration, I said, please sit down with me and watch this.
Yeah.
And if you had said no, I would have watched it by myself, frankly, because I saw it on my laptop a few weeks ago, which was, with my headphones on, which was already quite a lot. But to see it on our bigger screen and just to enjoy it with you, it's good to see this with an audience, so to speak, because it's meant for that.
I mean, did you cry?
A lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I cried at the beginning
I don't
too
know if you
because
could tell, but there were times.
Well, no, you were sobbing,
couldn't
bawling.
keep it together.
I try to be quiet about these things, unless it's like The Boy Who Could Fly, then I openly cry. But no, I cried a lot in the first couple of scenes just because I knew what was coming, and to see both those couples and to have us understanding of what was coming. But, as you've indicated, I think it is best to see, not that this podcast was any help, but it's best to see this not knowing what it is.
If you've listened to this whole podcast and have not seen the movie, well, that's your bad.
No, I apologize. I mean, we called it early on. We said, it's going to be spoilers and never.
There's always spoilers.
That's the nature of this podcast too. But at the same time, and to be honest, like if you've listened to it and you're, oh, that sounds interesting. Seeing this film and our description of it is not the same thing.
Right. No. Yeah.
So yeah,
we still would recommend it. Even
if you're just listening to this and
everything.
I thought they were going to talk about mass appeal or mass extinction, or I didn't know it was that mass. Okay, that's fine, because you could still see the film and I think be totally blown away by it, even if you know the stuff that we described is coming, because it's that good.
Yeah, it's that good. So
Fran Kranz, he made one of the best films of the year, writer, director, first timer, and. These are 4 of the best performances. Of the 4, though, I think Martha Plimpton and Jason Isaacs, in particular, are Oscar worthy. If not, they're incredible in this. Just astonishing performances.
Yeah. So, would you change anything about it?
No.
I know there's nothing.
No. It's hard to even be glib about this movie remotely. Not only just because of the seriousness of it, but
let's act out an alternative ending. Just kidding.
No, not for this one. Yeah, this is I think it's near perfect or perfect. I'll just say near perfect because again, I do think there are times where I thought, this is a stage play. They're doing their best to make it not a stage play, but honestly, they do it so well that I had forgotten about the theatrical trappings. As I said, I was in such suspense over every exchange. And because I didn't know how it was going to end.
Looking for clues. Oh my gosh. That's what I was doing.
Yeah, looking for clues. And also, but as I said, once we find out what this conversation is actually about, it's not like we go, oh, okay. No, it makes it worse.
It makes it worse.
So much worse because then we realize, oh, this is
serious.
This could get really, really ugly. Yeah. And thankfully, these are people who are haunted by this.
Oh, yeah.
And
of course.
Yeah, they're not looking for a fight. They're looking to be heard.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what everybody's looking for.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So it's timely. It's an important film, and I whether people see it in the theater or afterwards, this is a film that needs to be seen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that concludes this episode of So I Married a Film Critic, and we'll see you next time.
Aloha.